Welcome to the Kingdom Conversations podcast. Listen, I'm so excited that you decided to join us tonight. I am excited about tonight's launch episode. Some people would call it a pilot, but this is our first episode of the Kingdom Conversations podcast. And listen, the Kingdom Conversations podcast is designed to talk about all of the topics that we never want to talk about within the church walls. Many times we have questions and we never get the answers that we need. We have different topics and things that are really plaguing our communities, and we never talk about those as it relates to the church. I believe that the church has been called to be relevant. Especially in these times, in these days, when we're living in the last and evil days, as the old saints used to say, the last and evil days. And so I really want to dive in this podcast to really talk about all of those different issues, from sex to homosexuality. How do we handle the LGBTQ community? How do we deal with all the family dynamics and blended families and things of that nature? Today, we're going to be talking about mental health issues. And how do we deal with those things as it relates to the church? And so we're actually going to be covering a myriad of topics to really help people get the answers that they need and really find solutions. One of the things about Kingdom Conversations is not about bashing one sector or another. It's really about talking about the issues and then finding common ground and solutions to move us forward, to make us better as the kingdom of God. And so we can add to the kingdom of God. You know, our motto is building bridges through conversations for the kingdom, to grow the kingdom. And so we want to do that through our conversations. But right now, listen, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to like and share. Like and share. Love. Matter of fact, love button. I love that love button. So hit that love button. Like this post. Share this to as many people as you possibly can, because we want to spread the word that the Kingdom Conversations podcast has now launched. And we're going to be covering a lot of controversial things, some things that people may not want to deal with, but we're going to deal with it, and it's necessary to deal with those things. And so I'm excited. I know some of you all have seen my other podcasts or what have you, but this one is going to be very unique. It's as one of my guests was saying today, I'm going to be talking about a lot of the stuff that I post about. Right, I post about a lot of controversial topics and things. And so we're excited, even tonight, when we're going to talk about mental health issues within the four walls of the church. Oh, yes, mental health issues within the four walls of the church. I think it's very important that we look at this when we see, especially in today's society, we see so many people that are dealing with mental health issues. They're dealing with issues. They're dealing with anxiety. They're dealing with depression and all of these other things, all these other ailments. And what we see many times is that they are afraid to even go and seek help. We're going to talk about that tonight. When we look at the statistics, it shows the all-time high of those that have mental health issues. And watch this: many of those individuals are people that are in the church. They're in the four walls of the church, and so they're dealing with things in private. They won't tell anybody that they're suffering. They won't tell anybody that they're going through this. Even through this pandemic, we've seen how people have been suffering. And one of the quote unquote catchphrase mottos is check on somebody. Check on that one that you think is strong. Because the very ones that many times you think are strong are the ones that are suffering. And so we want to talk tonight about how do we deal with this? How do we conquer this even within the church? Should the church be responsible for those that may have mental health issues? What are the things that we have to do in order to help those that have mental health issues? And so tonight, I have two amazing guest speakers that are going to be coming forward, and they're going to talk with us tonight. And it's amazing because I know both of these individuals, but they're highly qualified individuals. We have Dr. Marion Wright Jr., and we also have Natalie Fuel. She's also a licensed clinical, licensed clinical mental health counselor supervisor.
Yep.
And of course, Dr. Marion Wright is a clinical psychiatrist. And so right now, I'm just going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about you and your background, and we'll go from there. Let's start with Dr. Wright.
Yes, I am delighted to be here. Hopefully, everyone can see and hear me okay. I whenever I speak about myself, I try to keep it as short as possible. And of course, when I'm standing next to Jermaine or Pastor Jay, my shortness really shows then. Uh, but I am, as he mentioned, I am a psychiatrist, undergraduate training at or education at Duke University. Attended medical school and graduated from UNC Chapel Hill. Imagine that. Uh, uh, I did my residency training at East Carolina University through the Brody School of Medicine in Greenville, North Carolina. Currently reside still in that area, even though I still consider myself a dermite. But I have worked in private practice mainly, going on close to about 18 years now. Um, but private practice, I also did some work with the college health or in the college health setting at East Carolina University through their student health services. Currently, I am working as the staff psychiatrist at the Kinston Community Behavioral Health Center. We are a multidisciplinary clinic. I work with the behavioral health division. We also have family medicine, dentistry, OBGYN providers through our clinic as well. And, you know, those that may be familiar with Kinston, that's certainly a socioeconomic area where there's a lot of help that's needed. That's where I'm working currently. And last thing, and I'll move on and allow the other guests to speak. As of today, I have been passed the mantle and have assumed the role of the senior pastor at Greater Emmanuel Temple of Grace in Durham, North Carolina. Many people may know my father. I was speaking with Pastor Jay earlier. My first connection and relationship with him came through that very church. So as of today, again, I have assumed the role of pastor there. So it will be interesting as we get into the discussion to speak both from the role as a psychiatrist and provider, but also as one who is in ministry and in church leadership.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Dr. Fuel,
Uh, no, I
I'm
have
speaking
no desire
it.
to do that. I am a licensed therapist, and I'm getting some feedback. Is that Is that me?
Yeah, maybe you may have to turn your speakers
Okay.
down some. Yeah.
Okay. So I got my license in 2008. I went to grad school at Central University, undergrad at UNC. So I'm laughing at Dr. Wright with all those Duke and University. I mean, at UNC is ridiculous. But I feel you. I feel you. I have been in the mental health field since 2005, private practice since '07. I am a relational therapist where I deal with or help with relationships. And relationships sometimes only think about romantic relationships, but I
Mm.
also focus on platonic relationships because how you show up in one relationship, you show up in all relationships. So I help people bridge that gap, work on their mental mindset, and understanding where their foundation comes from and why they behave the way they do.
Awesome, awesome. And so let's get right into the conversation again. We've had several conversations on my timeline, and I think that's how Natalie and I connected in this particular field, is what have you. I've known Natalie for years as well, and I told her, I said, you know what, I'm going to be starting a new podcast, and I want to cover this. And of course, Dr. Wright, like he mentioned, we've been knowing each other for well over, I guess, about 41 years, what have you. And my family was one of the first families that joined his father's church, and we want to say congratulations that the mantle has been passed. Congratulations on your elevation, what have you. And, you're well qualified. And you were definitely going to keep you in prayer. We know how that goes and everything. And so it's great because he's a doctor, but he's also a pastor. And so he sees it from both perspectives, as well as I have seen, even though I'm not a doctor, but I'm a pastor, and I've seen it from both perspectives. Even as one that I was over music ministry in my previous church, but was in high leadership. As far as the executive staff and executive leaders and all that, we were the part of the inner core. And so we were able to see how detrimental certain things or life circumstances can be for individuals. And so I want to start here. We've seen year after year, I've seen story after story even come across my timeline. People have even inboxed me in regards to what they were going through and what they were experiencing at the hands of the church. And so we know that the church gets a bad rap for a lot of stuff, right? And some well-deserving, some not, right? And my thing is, okay, I've always been the type of individual to say, okay, how can we position the church better? And I think this is one field that we really have to do a better job in. People feel so ridiculed or what have you as it relates to them going through issues in life and not being able to turn to anybody in their church body. And so I just want to start here. How do you think the church should address mental illness? And should it be something that is just generically done or something that is intentionally done? And what I mean by that is saying, okay, we know that members have these types of issues. We know that they're struggling in certain areas or what have you. So let's go ahead and put a program in place to deal with this. Oftentimes we see, I always say this, I said, every pastor is not designed to counsel every situation. And so as a pastor, well, I'm going to leave that. I'm going to say that for another question. But so tell me, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So tell me this. What do you guys feel, or how do you guys feel about implementing a mental health program or a mental health awareness program within our church bodies?
I guess I can start.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I'll be concise because I know we have a lot to cover. I would say it starts from the top down. It starts with leadership. I've seen many times that, and not just with mental health issues, but with other things in general, the spiritual leader, the pastor, and those in ministry leadership set the tone for how that ministry as a whole deals with a variety of topics. But I would say certainly as it pertains to mental health, I think it again, it starts with leadership and trickles down from there. So I think as pastors and those in ministry leadership not only become more aware of these issues, but become more vocal about them, I think that trickles down to the parishioners. So it's important, I think, as pastors to talk about these issues to their congregation, even to preach and teach on them as they are led, by God.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that we are looking forward to going forward with Grady Emmanuel is actually, developing, programs and whether it be by seminars, lectures, bringing in guest speakers, allowing those in the congregation to talk openly about things that they may have been dealing with or family members have been dealing with. So again, to my short answer is, I think as leaders, as church leaders, buy into this and begin speaking more openly about it from the pulpit and to their members, that I think is going to be the best way to generate more discussion about these issues.
Awesome, awesome. All right, Natalie, what's your thoughts on this?
Yes, I totally agree. I think it does start from the top. I also think that it should be somewhat normalized. It should be a part
Mm,
of the whole department team. You have the usher board, you have the minister of music, you have the elders board and the deacon board, and then we should have a mental health board that
hmm,
should not be combined with physical health. I think what we see is a lot,
that's good.
you see a little bit of mental health, you see a little bit of disability, and then you see a whole lot of health, physical health. And those are so different and they can't be combined in one department. We have seen over this pandemic how important it is to take care of our mind, our stress level. We have been under stress that we have never imagined. And I think a lot of suppressed mental health issues have been coming out. And now we don't know what to do with it. And I'm saying those things were there, and the church should be there. If we're going to be a hospital, we got to have every department in the hospital. It's important to take care of our ministers because it cannot be or him or her to take care of everyone. There has to be a support group for the minister as he or she takes care of the congregation. But there also has to be a department or resources for the members to be able to go to also.
Wow, you just touched on something I think is very important. You said that there needs to be a support group for the ministers and
Mm-hmm.
the preachers. And I think what people don't realize is that pastors need a support. They need some way to release what they're going through. I was on a actual post on Facebook, and the young lady was saying how the stress level of a worship leader was just as much as a pastor. And I said, no, I totally agree. We need to pray for our pastors as well as our worship leaders and
Mm-hmm.
minstrels and all of that. But your stress level is nowhere near what a pastor has to go through, and the stress that they deal with. And so I think it's very important that pastors do have an outlet. They do have somebody that they can talk through a lot of the things that they're going through emotionally, instead of keeping that bottled up. We see now more than ever before, so many pastors are walking away from the pulpit. And if they're not walking away, they're dying in the pulpit. I mean, how many
Mm-hmm.
times have we seen that in the past 3 years alone? Where a pastor just drops dead in the pulpit, or he's finished preaching, sits down, and he passes away. And it's because of a lot of the stress that pastors go through. And so, Dr. Wright,
Or even death by suicide.
right, absolutely. A lot of them are
Yeah.
committed suicide as well. We've seen
Yeah.
it. And people wonder, well, how in the world can the pastor, that's been preaching the word of God, been doing this and that and encouraging us and all that, how can he commit suicide? It's because you don't understand everything that goes on in the realm of being a pastor. I told him, I said, you take your ministry and multiply that by every ministry in the church and then all of the lay members. And he's got to oversee all of that. He's got to pray for everybody. I said, and then many times people don't think that, we get phone calls all times of the night. People don't think that we have our own families, our own dreams and goals. And so, but what we did is we accepted the call of God on our lives to shepherd God's people. And so a lot of times people don't take that into account. And I think that's vitally important. And Dr. Wright, you could kind of speak to this, if you will, about, we were talking before about the stigma of mental health, but even from a pastoral standpoint, how we really know for sure that a lot of pastors, they won't seek help because they have an ego issue. Right. They have an ego issue. Or they feel like they got it all. I can handle it all. And I can, hold the world, on my shoulders or what have you. And God never called us to do that. And so kind of speak to that and your thoughts on that.
Very good question. And well, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about my book, but
oh yeah, we're going to talk about that too, because it's good.
It's one thing that one point that I try to drive home in the book, dealing with the stigma of, well, the book is specifically about depression, but I make some general statements about, mental health as a whole. But I think a lot of the stigma derives from traditional teaching about faith and healing. And as best I can try to summarize it, traditionally we've been taught that, if someone totally relied on God or had total faith in God for their healing, they wouldn't need to seek outside help. So
right.
As if to say, hey, I'm believing God for my healing, so why would I take medicine? Why would I go to the doctor? Why would I, go to a hospital or seek outside help if I'm, relying on God or believing in God? So I think a lot of the stigma, with mental health and to some degree physical or medical issues as well, derives from that thinking. And the other thing to consider, some of the stigma, I think, also comes from what some people have believed is the origin of mental illness. Mental illness is of the devil. Well, all illness
is it right?
In some degree, derives from the enemy.
Right.
But if I had to narrow it down even more, people, you can read, I think it's St. Mark chapter 5, where it talks about the demoniac, or the man that was demon possessed, the man of the Gadarenes. And if you read that, some people, when they think of mental illness, that's exactly what they think of. This man was, quote, crazy, was out of his mind, was breaking chains, was up all night, making a lot of noise, cutting himself, self-harm. He lived among the tombs. This crazy man is up all, hours of the night, hanging out in the cemetery. And so, again, this man was possessed, as we know, with many devils. So the point I'm getting at is, again, if people have that picture of what it means to have a mental illness, then traditionally some people have thought, well, they're demon possessed. If you cast that demon out or demon, then they're going to be all right.
Right.
And so, again, if people have bought into that or conceptualize all mental illness, as demon possession, again, that can be, or I believe that is another reason why the stigma exists. So, but and I'll say this, and I'll, allow for some other discussion. I'm glad we're having, this type of discussion to kind of get that out in the open. And I believe that, in a sense, just as science evolves, I think our understanding of God and understanding of the scriptures evolve. I don't think necessarily that it was our ancestors' intention to deceive us.
Right.
I think, a lot of it was, hey, this is based on kind of what we know and believe at this point in time. But just as, medical science or just knowledge in general, has evolved, now we kind of see things differently and understand, where a lot of the origins of these things come from.
Absolutely. Natalie, you have anything on that?
Yes, I think it also is culturally too. I think the combination of our culture
absolutely.
and our religion has caused us to believe that we don't need to seek mental health professionals. I think that we have all been taught, go pray about it, trust in the Lord, and He will answer your prayer. And I believe that totally. But is that what you do when your car breaks down? Or do you go pray about it, seek God's guidance, and then go to a mechanic to get your car fixed? So I think we're not looking at that in the same way. It's important for us to make sure that our mind is together. And I think we have a battle in the Black community that we have been taught, one, going to a therapist is a white person's thing. Black people go to their pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, what more burden do you put on your pastor on a thing that he or she may not be equipped to take care of? So it is important that we allow our pastors to stay in their lane and allow other people who have professions and education stay in their lane. You don't want me in the pulpit. That's not my lane, but I will help you in therapy. So we all need to realize that there are professionals out there that can help us deal with our problems as we pray and seek the Lord for guidance.
That's good. Great discussion. And so one of the things that we often face when we're dealing with certain issues is, or I would say from a pastoral standpoint, one of the things that I've noticed is that some pastors try to counsel things or deal with certain issues that they're not equipped to deal with. And one of the things I've said previously is that as a pastor, you have to recognize that God didn't call you to do everything, right? Even though Paul said, I became all things to all men, let's keep that in context, right? He was talking about as far as winning people to the faith and not offending them or what have you. And so, but I don't have to be all things to every member of my church. And I have to understand what my boundaries are. If I haven't gone to school to get educated on counseling, then that's not an area I should be actually dealing with. And so how do we say, okay, how do we help pastors realize when it's time to draw the line and say, okay, this is outside of my specialization or my education, and I need to refer you to outside counsel?
Good.
Well, I think that if you know that you don't have the training, then you should not attempt to do it. So if you know that you are not a chef, do not take that catering job. So if you know as a minister.
But I'm a pastor of God. I feel like God has anointed me to do everything.
Well, okay.
That's what they would say. I mean,
they would say that. But if someone comes to you, and we in our culture have done this, if someone comes to you with molestation in their family, what are you as an unequipped person going to help them through this situation? Or let's take it even further. Let's take it down some. I'm coming to you because I want to marry this man. Do you have the wherewithal to know how to counsel me and make sure that we are making a good decision for ourselves? If pastors want to do counseling, then I suggest that they go seek further education so that they can be ready to do counseling. Because in a counseling room, as Dr. Wright would know, you can come in thinking that you're going to be talking about one thing and it can flip on you real quick.
Right.
And you have to be trained to know when that flip happens and how to handle it. So if I'm coming to you getting marital counseling and then I disclose to you that I'm having suicidal thoughts, how are you as a pastor who's not equipped going to help me with my suicidal thoughts?
Yeah, that's good, and you make a great point there, and I think that's one thing that we have to get people to understand, and I think it's probably one of the hardest things to do is to get a pastor to understand that. It's like, okay, you do have certain limitations. That doesn't mean that you're limited in God or that your anointing is limited or anything of that nature, but that just means that you're not equipped to handle this. I kind of summons that or kind of make a parallel between a pastor that's been single all of his life, right, versus a pastor that's been married. There's certain things that you may be able to say, okay, I advise you on, but let's be real. There's certain things you will never experience until you get there. Right, all of the training that I had as an adjutant and over the MIT class and doing a lot of the stuff that my former pastor thought was going to prepare me for pastoring. There was some stuff I had to learn on the job training with, right? And so we have to understand that and understand that, okay, if you're not equipped, you may be doing more harm than good, especially when you come into a situation where somebody may be suicidal or they may be on the verge of hurting themselves. They may have an issue where they're cutting themselves or whatever the case may be. You pray about it and then refer them to somebody that can help them. And I think a lot of times pastors allow their egos to get in the way. And they don't want to, especially the old school mentality, they feel like it's a failure if they refer somebody out or something versus helping them right there in that office. But many times that's just not the case. It's just not the case. And so what we find is a lot of times people will not come and seek out help. And so, Dr. Wright, what do you think are some of the causes of that? Why don't people come out, as it relates to the church? Is it because of them being ridiculed? Is it because that people feel like, oh, they don't have faith in God or they're not spirit filled? Or what are some of the things that you think may be the case of that?
All of the above, man. No, I mean, gosh, man, I probably need to write a sequel to my book.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
To expand on some of these things, but you're absolutely right. Just a sense of embarrassment, and again, going back to the previous discussion about stigma. Again, if that's something that's pervasive within a church, then the parishioners in that church would feel a sense of embarrassment about seeking help, about opening up about these types of things. I'll share a quick story and get out the way. When the first private practice that I worked at was in Wilson, North Carolina. And one of the most striking stories to me, I allude to it in my book, but didn't really get into a lot of details about it. But I remember a young lady coming in, and she came in and sat down and across from me. And the whole time she was clutching her purse and she kept looking over at the door. And so I'm like, why does she keep looking at the door? I'm thinking, is she paranoid? I didn't know what exactly was going on. But later on, she admitted that she had this fear that somebody, from her church was going to, open the door and see her in there and be like, ah,
Wow.
I'm like, wow, this is so it's almost like she was sitting in such a manner where she had to get up quickly and leave, for some reason, that she'd be able to do that. Now I know that sounds to us kind of silly and ridiculous, but eventually she admitted to me, hey, I'm not supposed to be here. If people from my church or my pastor knew that I was here, they'd be really upset with me, or I'd be very embarrassed about it, and those types of things. But again, the sense of embarrassment, shame. I've even had people. Where I would prescribe medication for them because I thought that would be helpful to them, only for them to come back a month or so later and said, well, I didn't take it, or I got it filled, but I never took it, or I didn't even pick it up from the pharmacy. So then I'd ask, well, what's kind of the issue there? Well, if people knew that I was taking an antidepressant, they'd be ashamed of me, or they would pick on me. But I'm like, well, you don't have to tell people your business.
Right.
Unless they work at the pharmacy where you pick up your medication, they don't have to know that you take medicine.
Absolutely.
So it's those types of things that, that I've seen, personally, clinically, that clue me into, as to why, how people feel, about these types of things.
Gotcha. And so, Natalie, let me ask you this. When do you know it's time to refer a church member to a professional?
Well, let me step back. As
Okay.
a minister who wants to be, or who is a minister, not only to his members of the church, but also the community that the church surrounds, it will be nice if that minister or his team or her team would go seek the professionals in the area. So they will have a reference list. So when a minister gets to a point where they feel uncomfortable, or if something is not going in the direction that they first thought, it may be good for them to already have a referral list. So then they'll feel empowered to refer out.
That's good.
It is important for us mental health providers to offer our assistance to these ministers so that they can create a referral list. So it's a bunch of us working together in order to help our community. As far as what a minister, there's a lot of stuff that maybe that he or she shouldn't, but then there's a lot that he can or she can. So a conflict resolution, I think we all can help someone else with their conflict resolution. I believe that when it gets too elevated, or the conflict turns three ways, you argue with the pastor, and then you need to bring somebody else into this. I don't know if that in that situation you might want to bring a mental health provider. It depends on what the issue is. If it's a conflict within the family unit, then possibly. It's a case by case basis, but I would say I think we all have that gut feeling when we are out of order and out of our lane, and we need to just recognize it and be okay with it, and then ask for help.
Now let me ask you guys this: when you're speaking to someone that's dealing with mental illness, or dealing with some issues or what have you, what would you say to them on recognizing, or should I say, I would say recognizing and being able to discern whether or not their pastor can help them in that area or not? Should it be credential based? Should it be experience based or whatever? Because I've seen situations where the pastor has done more harm than good, right? Even like in marriage counseling and all of that, where I've heard some horror stories, and I'm like, the pastor told you that? I'm like, are you serious? And so it's like the same thing. I think they need to know, should I go and seek help from my pastor? And I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm saying, you should know at what level or what to expect. You know what I mean? And so kind of talk about that, in a sense of, okay, what should they be looking for as it relates to taking those issues to their pastor and that type of thing.
So again, you're asking from the perspective of a lay member.
Yes. Yep. So a lay
Uh,
member that's dealing with some mental issues or what have you, um, how should they approach that and say, okay, you know what, I definitely want to, approach my pastor, but I don't know if he's qualified for this. How can they? Is there a litmus test that they can go by? Is there, you know what I mean? Is
mm,
the, that type of thing?
right, right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm biased, Dr. Wright. What do you think? I think that if it's something mental, then you need to go to a mental provider. Just like if
Mhm.
it's something financial, if you don't know how your minister manages his money or her money, then you don't need to go to that person. So I think
Mhm.
the minister will show what they are um, professional in. I don't know. They
Mhm.
would.
Mhm.
If I would say, if it's anything mental, maybe I'm biased. Go to a professional. Go to
Mm-hmm.
someone. Just like you would not go to your pastor if you had car trouble, unless you knew your pastor knew everything about a car. Then you
Right.
might go. And even then, why are you putting that on your pastor? He could be a great mechanic or she a great mechanic, but they are
Mhm.
your pastor. So why put more on them than they can bear?
Right.
Right.
Go to the professional. You can now. I would say, and I would love for this to happen for the layperson to go to their pastor and say, "Pastor, I am dealing with X mental health. Please pray for me as I seek professional help. And if you can assist me, I will
Mhm.
greatly appreciate it." That's how
Mm.
you get your pastor involved.
Right.
Right.
But don't expect him
True.
or her to just know how to handle your situation.
Right.
Right. And I agree wholeheartedly. And sometimes I think we have to compartmentalize things. There are. Um, I think some people can benefit both from a spiritual perspective, or spiritual input that they get from their spiritual leader, and still seek,
Mhm.
professional help as well. Sometimes people may struggle with their faith,
Mm-hmm.
because of the mental health issues or what have you. And so, even though they're in the process of seeking help from a mental health professional, there'll be times when they may need to go to the pastor. Pastor, please pray for me.
Right.
I'm dealing with some things, and and again, full disclosure, let them know. Yes, I am
Mhm.
seeking help. Uh, you know, uh, for this issue, but I'm coming to you for prayer and spiritual support, and all those types of things. So sometimes, yes, we may have to compartmentalize it, but I agree with Natalie, completely on that.
Now there was a great question that came up. Let me go back to that. And also, if you have any questions, let me take a station identification break right here. Make sure you like, share, and follow us. But also, if you have any questions that you want to ask the panel, please post those in the actual chat, and I'll make sure we actually get those answered as well. A great question that came up from Brother Ruben Rodriguez. He says, "What about affordability to professional help?" I think that's a very good question, because I think a lot of people don't realize how much resources is really out there. But I'll let you guys go ahead and tackle that.
Um, okay. I would say whatever you want to do for yourself, you will put the investment in it. If you want a great honeymoon, then you're not going to go to Motel 6. No, no shade. Well, there's shade on Motel 6, but I'm just saying. If you know that you've been dealing with this situation for a long time, you've tried everything, put in the investment to take care of yourself. You will not go the cheap route if you were dealing with cancer or if you were dealing with a broken leg. You will go seek the help and figure out how to pay for it. As the church, you cannot always rely on the church to help you pay for it, but the church may have some resources that they have put aside for this. But you look at your finances and make sure that you are being a good steward to your finances so that you can take care of your mental health. Now, there are benefits in your insurance policy that will take care of it, and you can definitely use that. And there are some great therapists out there that will that are accepting private pay, and then you may be able to get reimbursed. But the idea that mental health is not affordable, we have to stop that, because I promise you, if you are a parent and your child needs something and you may not have it, you're going to figure it out. You're going to go fund me. You're going to drop that cash app. You're going to about near steal to take care of your child. And I'm saying take care of your child's parent. Because if you don't take care of your child's parent, then your child is going to also have issues.
That's good. That's good. And so, even for those that, let's say, are less fortunate, they may be low income or what have you. I think it's important to say that you still have resources out there, right? And the key to it, like Natalie said, is doing whatever you find necessary to do in order to get that help. Another great question that came up is, how would you go about suggesting a mental health team at your church? And what does this look like? That's a very good question. That's a very good question.
Well, I think to start with, and Pastor Jay, I can't thank you enough for organizing this.
Absolutely.
But I think as lay members tune into things like this, become more aware of podcasts and all the things that are available. For discussions like this, I would encourage people to make it known to your pastor. Say, hey, pastor, watch this clip, or what do you think about this, and things of that nature. But as much as we can do to get the word out to churches and people that frequent church, I think the more the better. I'm currently also on a panel with our international organization where we did probably about at least 4 or 5 different discussions that went out all over the world, about mental health issues, just in the last year. But I think, again, if people, make their pastor, their leaders aware that, these issues do exist, I think that's one way to do it. As far as what a mental health team would look like, that's a tough question. I, I'm fortunate or blessed, well, both, I should say, in a sense, to be able to kind of walk the line between, these two areas. But I think another thing that we can do, and I know it may seem like I'm getting off topic, but as we evangelize and reach out to people, even those that are professionals, I envision where we're able to bring in people, into the fold, into the church that have, these levels of or areas of expertise. In an ideal sense, we'd have lawyers in the church, doctors in the church, counselors, nurses,
Right.
and all these people that are able to, we're able to connect with them on multiple levels. One, when they become people of like faith, but also to know, hey, here's someone I can go to, for financial advice. This person is an
Mhm.
accountant and he's a member of my church. So, I think, again, answering the question about building a mental health team, I think ideally, if we can get more people to come in that, that have expertise in this area, they can certainly help to build a team in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree. It could also look like you polling your congregation to see who are your mental health providers,
Hmm.
and be cautious that just because they're in the medical field doesn't mean that they know mental health. So
Hmm.
just because you may know an RN doesn't mean
Mhm.
that he or she knows how to handle mental health. So make sure
Hmm.
you make sure you are very specific about what you're looking for. If you do not have that in your congregation, then your surrounding community may be able to help. I'm sure there are some providers in every community within radius of your church that you can
Mhm.
go and speak to the owner or the providers there and say, this is what we want in our church. What can you help us do? And they may be
Hmm.
saying, I'm a good referral source. These are the areas that I'm an expertise in. And these are the
Mhm.
areas that I can have colleagues in that can help. So then you're pulling that together. So it doesn't necessarily have to be members in your church, but
Mhm.
use your community resources to build
Right.
that department.
Mhm.
Right. That's good.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's good. And I think that's important. And even in building that, again, make sure they're qualified. You know,
Right.
Mhm.
because we used to automatically at Junior. I'm sorry, Dr. Wright. He knows this automatically. If you was a nurse by trade, then you was a nurse at the church.
Right.
You were head of the nursing department. You head of the usher board. That type of stuff. And so over the years, it's like, okay, willing bodies are the ones that they put in, but in certain circumstances, they have to be willing and qualified. And I think
Right.
this is one of those actual instances or what have you.
And I
One
would
of the
say also,
uh-huh,
Pastor Jay,
absolutely.
um, and Dr. Wright, please join me.
Mhm.
We have to be careful in this area because we can have dual relationship. So
Hmm.
I will be very cautious that if I'm the minister of music, I would not want to provide therapy to one of my choir members.
Right. Right.
Or would they want to receive therapy from me? But if they
Hmm.
know that I'm a therapist and they are comfortable with me because they are in my choir, then they may ask me, can you refer me? And I will be glad to refer.
Right.
But I don't think
Mhm.
as a mental health professional that I will feel comfortable providing therapy to someone that I have another relationship with.
Mhm.
And let me ask you guys this as well. And this just came to me. What are your thoughts um, on churches really teaching their leaders about mental health and the possibility of those that are serving under them dealing with those mental health issues, being aware of that, being able to recognize that, and that type of thing, or what have you? Do you think we should have some type of training that's kind of like a mandatory training for all ministry leaders or what have you, similar to like quote unquote like a CPR training when you're dealing with
Mm.
emergency or you're dealing with kids and all that and what have you?
Mhm. Yeah, I would say that's important. And again, it's the goal wouldn't necessarily be to turn everybody into experts because
Right.
as Natalie would say, that takes years of
Right.
education.
Absolutely.
But just sometimes mere recognition of certain things, or
Hmm.
knowing certain signs and symptoms to look for, to know when to refer, or when to intervene. I think those things are important. One of the things that times when I've spoken to congregations, or maybe larger group meetings at conferences, a question that comes up fairly often are things like signs that someone may be struggling with suicidal thoughts.
Mm.
So again, I go over that just to kind of tell people, hey, here's some things you may want to look for. So yes, I would totally agree that there needs to be some level of training. Again, if nothing more than getting people to recognize certain signs and symptoms, because it's easy to kind of let certain things go or not pay attention to certain things. I'll use this as an example and be finished with this question, but something as simple as um, you know decreased church attendance. You we tend to, sometimes we don't always pay attention to that, but if you have someone that's never misses a Sunday, never misses a service, and then suddenly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 Sundays go by and you don't see the person. Hey, it may be something to that.
Right.
What's going on? Is the person depressed? Is something else going on that they're ashamed about, or having some other issues going on? So yes, I agree totally that it would help to to have some type of training both for leaders and lay members in the church.
Absolutely. And you said something there when you were talking about them being missing, 9, 10 Sundays or what have you, straight. And then the reverse is also true too. Not taking time off to refresh and to get relaxed and renew your mind and spirit and all that as well. And so they both can work, together in that regard, as it relates to your affecting your mental health and having issues in that regard. One of the other things too that I thought about, and I've heard this as well, and we see this or we hear about it from time to time, is when a pastor is dealing with mental issues himself. And one of the questions was, can a pastor or a church leader that can he teach about mental health if he's suffering from mental health issues? And so I thought that was a pretty interesting question. So I wanted to pose that to the panel.
Okay.
You go first.
Uh, I think it's like anything that you can speak from your experience. I think it would be a powerful thing if a minister at the pulpit would say, I am suffering from depression and anxiety, and I am seeking professional help with this. I think that is a powerful thing. However, will you see some people look at him or her differently? Yes. But I think the majority of people will give grace and say, maybe I need to look into this. When you see your minister always at the church, always at every activity, always doing things, and you know that they have a family, you need to, as a church body, and especially the executive board, Pastor, you need a vacation and you need to leave on this date for this long and get yourself together. And they can be fine, but you still need that break. And we as members need to allow them to have that break. And that means do not call when they are on that break. That means that there has to be a team when the pastor is there, that he or she is not getting all the calls, that he or she is not taking all the issues, because this is a big corporation that people don't want to think about. The church is a huge corporation, and we have a spiritual twist to it, but it's a lot of moving parts. It's a lot of logistical things, and one person should not be responsible for all of it. We would not expect the president of the United States to know and do everything. That person has so many people working with him to make it so that he can do whatever he needs to do, but the country is still running. We have to look at it with our ministers too. We have to be mindful that if we go through sadness, then our pastors go through sadness. If you know your pastor is dealing with grief or loss, give them that opportunity to grieve. Don't assume that, well, he know God, he's praying, so he gonna be back up there in the pulpit the next day after his mama died. Would you? So give
Right.
him or her some grace. I
Mhm.
think that so the person can speak on their experience, but when it comes to providing suggestions or clinical stuff, they need to refer. But I think a pastor can say, look, it's important to take care of your mental health. And what does that
Mhm.
look like? What does that mean for you? I think that is a great thing for a minister to do.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah. You know, exactly. Piggybacking off that, yes, I agree. I think a pastor can um, teach and speak about mental health issues, even though they may have or have had their own struggles. I think what that does is humanize that person. Pastor
That's
Jay,
good.
you spoke earlier about some people in church leadership having egos,
Mm-hmm.
ego issues, feeling like I should be able to do everything. All this. I don't need to sleep. I don't need to, to eat. And,
Right.
do all these things. But I think from the perspective, of a pastor, again, I think it would be helpful to the congregation, even if he or she were to say, "Hey, I had some struggles with this myself," or there's sometimes when I may feel depressed, sometimes I feel anxious. Again,
Mm-hmm.
I think it helps to humanize that person, so the lay members are not looking at that person as superhuman or he never gets tired, he never gets burned out. You
Mm-hmm.
know, and I think that's important. And this probably would be the first time I've shared this publicly. There was a period of time during my first job in private practice, and I didn't realize it at the time until after I had gone through it and gotten out of it. But I went through a phase of clinical depression myself.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I had become so wrapped up in caring for my patients that I couldn't see it in myself.
Mm.
And the interesting thing was that it took one of my patients actually to kind of bring this to the forefront. Another quick story: young lady came in, and she I started the session as usual, and probably about 3 or 4 minutes in, she said, "Wait a minute, stop, stop, stop." And I said, "What's going on?" She said, "Dr. Wright, something's not right." And I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" She said, "I've been coming to you for a long time." She said, "I can tell something's not right
Mm,
about you." Uh,
Wow.
and I
that's
said,
good.
so then, they and Natalie can probably attest to this or speak to this as well. In training, they try to tell you to, keep your facial expressions neutral and all these types of things. So,
Yeah.
whatever I thought I was doing to hide how I was feeling, apparently I was doing a terrible job at it. This lady was seeing something about my facial expressions or body language or something that
Mhm.
made her stop in the middle of what she was talking about to ask me, "How are you doing? What's going on with you?"
Mm-hmm.
And
Wow.
we try to play the professional card. Well, I'm okay. This session's not about me.
Right.
This is your session. This is your time and all that. And she said, "Nope, Dr. Wright." She said, "I'm not answering any more of your questions till you tell
Wow.
me how you're doing." And man, I
Wow.
don't know what came over me. I put my pen down and I said, "Miss So and so, if you must know," I said, "I'm not doing good right now."
Wow.
Here I am probably breaking all the rules that
It's okay. We're not telling.
they tell you in, training and all that. I said, well,
Mhm.
if you must know, I mean, because she pressed me, she pushed me to the line. I said, I'm not doing well. I said, I'm tired. I said, I'm stressed out. I'm not sleeping well. I
Mhm.
feel like I'm, letting everybody down. So I'm start letting out all this stuff in a matter of about 2 minutes. And I said, well, now that we got that out the way, how have you been doing? And then she said, well, thank you, Dr. Wright. She said, because I just knew there was something going on with you. But again, I said all that to say that, again, I kind of went through a period myself. But back to the question about spiritual leaders or pastors, it is my belief sometimes that God will allow us to experience certain things or go through certain things
Mm-hmm.
to humble us, to humanize us, but
Mhm.
also sometimes to allow us to feel what the people
People are feeling
Right.
right.
experience from
That's
time to
true.
time.
That's true.
And I remember thinking to myself again after I kind of came out of that phase of depression. I remember thinking to myself, well, Lord, if it feels like that, that is terrible.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
That is absolutely horrible. And but praise God, I got through it. Amen.
And so, even staying along the lines of that was good, and that shows again that we're human. Many
Yep.
times people put pastors and church leaders on a pedestal and expect them to be the perfect, perfect saint or this perfect example. And many times when they fall, now they're disappointed. They don't understand what's going on and all that. And it's like, okay, we're humans, right? We fall and we make mistakes and all that. The Word of God tells us that all fall short of the glory of God every
Mm-hmm.
day. And so, understanding that is so key. I'm reminded of I used to always be a stickler for this and that on pastors and all that. And God revealed something to me one day. He said, "You know what? Most pastors have never been pastors before, and
Right.
so you're expecting them to know something that they're still learning." You see what I'm saying? Many times, like said earlier, many times it's on the job training. And so
Mm-hmm.
you may be thinking or expecting them to handle a situation, excuse me, to handle a situation a certain way. And God may be telling them to handle it a totally different. Why? Because they know the intricacies of that individual that they're dealing with. So where I may have to come to one individual and I could be a little bit more stern with them,
Mm-hmm.
that other individual may be a babe in Christ and may not be able to take that. And so you've got to, you got to know that and understand that we're at different levels. And
Mm-hmm.
even when we've been seasoned in Christ, that does not mean that we still don't deal with issues. And I
Right.
think a lot of times people forget that and feel like, the pastor or their church leaders or what have you, have no cares in the world. No, we're living in the same world that you're living in. Well, many of us have to go, and we're bivocational, and so we have to go work our jobs and then still do the work of the Lord. And so a lot of that can be very stressful. And even staying here and talking about depression and with mental illness, the different various niches within mental illness. What are some of the things that people can look out for to kind of detect when they're actually dealing with mental illness? It's one thing to say, okay, I'm just sad,
Mm-hmm.
because I lost my friend or what have you. But at what point do we say, okay, I may be dealing with depression. I may be dealing with something where I need to go seek help. I often say, okay, it's okay to grieve, but if you grieve in a year from now, there may be something that you may have to kind of say, okay, I'm in a sunken place, and now I'm more in a field of depression versus just really grieving for my family member or friend or whatever the case may be.
I would say, just like your physical health, go get
Mm-hmm.
preventative health. So go
Mm,
when you have
that's good.
recent grief so that it won't turn into decades of grief.
Mm-hmm.
So a therapist is not just there for the hardcore mental problems. We are there to help you do preventative stuff. If you're having a
Mm,
conflict at your church, You can go to a therapist and see that person for 1 or 2 times and be good and be able to handle the situation differently. Or you can go and say, I am a pastor of this church. These are the issues that come to me. Help me process them. Help me to recognize them. So that therapist can give counsel to the pastor. The pastor can go back to the congregation and know how to handle the situation. So we could be used in a whole lot of ways. So I think it's important that we start with, if we're going to eat healthy and exercise to prevent diabetes and high cholesterol, then let's look at the same way with our mental health. If you know that you are dealing with chronic illness, then you probably having some mental problems too. Or if if something just happened, Pastor Jay, I met you as a musician. So if something happened and you couldn't be a musician, that may cause some sadness that you might need to talk about. And I would say when that thing happened, go talk to somebody so that you can process it properly. And then therefore you're able to handle the situation on your own. We are just here to help guide you. If you ever go to a therapist and they are giving you advice, you at the wrong place, because we are not advice givers. We help you look at a situation in so many different angles to give you so many different perspectives so that you can make an informed decision for yourself. I see you 1 hour every week. So you are the master of your life. I am the master of being a therapist, and we work together to help with your problem. So let's start using our mental health providers as preventative providers so that we will not have to go into the clinical depression state, that we don't have to write that diagnosis down because we helped you process things before you even got there.
And so, is it safe to say that a counselor, mental health counselor, therapist, is something that should be normal? It should be normalized.
Yes.
It's something that you should have, just like you go and do a doctor, a regular checkup at your doctor or your physician. It should be the same way with your therapist. You should have a therapist that you go to and check in with once or twice or even once a week. It depends on what you need. But I think it's so important, and that was a good point that you made about the preventive measures, right? The preventive maintenance or what have you. That's why we go to the doctor and keep make sure that our vitals and stuff are strong and make sure things are right, because we want to prevent from a disease forming in our bodies and all that. And we understand that all of this stuff stems from sin entering into the world. And because of that, we've got to do the things necessary to make sure that our bodies last. And that also means our mindsets as well, and make sure that our minds are healthy as well. And so, Dr. Wright, you would have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, man. If I did, I wouldn't do it justice.
Definitely. Okay. So one of the, and we're going to wrap it up. But one of the last questions I had was, and somebody kind of asked me this, or asked me to poll the actual panel with this, is how do we go about as the church fostering a healthy environment for those that are dealing with mental health? In other words, how do we make it comfortable? Is that something that we can do? Is that something that I know we talked a little bit earlier about leadership, putting in place programs and all of that? But I personally believe it's something that we have to intentionally do. But what are your thoughts on making the church an environment where people can say, you know what, I've got a mental issue I need help with, and being able to foster that environment where they're free to be able to do that or what have you?
I would say that before we even do that, as a church body, we need to come together in fellowship and experience different things. I think when it's a difference when I see you once a week, and then when we go on a trip together, that's a whole nother experience. And I get to know you in a whole nother way, other than one day a week when we're not really supposed to be talking in service, and then we see each other and then leave. I think if we did other activities, then we become more of a family. Then I will feel more comfortable in saying, Pastor J, Pastor Wright, I'm going through this because I've seen you in different areas. I've experienced things with you. I experienced playing Uno with you, Pastor Wright, at the church. But I also remember he's a doctor too. Maybe I could ask him about this too, because
Right.
he is human, because he beat me real good in that Uno game. That shows that we have different areas that we can help. If I know that I feel comfortable with somebody, I'm going to open up to them. So I don't think that a church should just do a program, because we have to lay the groundwork. We have to get some buy-in from our members. I think if we start by fellowshipping and experiencing different things outside of the church service, then people will be more open to share what their needs are.
That's good. That's
Oh,
good.
that's powerful. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. You knocked that out the park. But it's interesting. Just sitting and listening to you give that response. Um, it, for some reason, my mind went back to testimony service. Uh,
Yes.
Uh-huh.
well, most churches don't do that anymore.
Right.
But that used to be the way to, and that went from anything to people putting all their business out there in front of the congregation, or people telling stories. But you raise a good point there, that some people saw that as their opportunity to tell the other members and the pastor what was going on in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And as we have kind of gotten away from that, or maybe some churches still do that. You're right. I think it's good to create an atmosphere of fellowship even outside of the church, because you're exactly right. We come in, we have the service. It's like, all right, it's time to go home. People not necessarily sitting there in the service, talking while the pastor's preaching. I hope not.
Right.
So and even I think that brings up a good point, even more so now during the pandemic, because I think the pandemic has created even more separation, and isolation in the church than usual. But hopefully now people are at a point where they're like, hey, we need to try to find ways to reconnect with people. Maybe small groups get together and go out to eat and those types of things. But Natalie, again, you really hit on to something there, that as we create an atmosphere where people feel comfortable opening up about these types of things, that can foster that environment. Again, going back to what you asked, Pastor Jay, where people feel comfortable sharing things about their mental health.
And I think that is so important. It goes back to when you were telling your story, and how your patient knew you well enough to know that something was going on with you. And I think that really speaks volumes. And that's how it should be in the church. I think many times people are going through by themselves because we haven't fostered those relationships. I shouldn't have a brother or a sister in Christ that I'm close with, and I don't know something is off with them, right? I was dealing with a situation about 3 weeks ago, and I was just kind of off. It was a Sunday morning, I preached like I normally do and all of that, and then I went and helped out another church at an afternoon service. And the guy was like, "Man, you okay?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." But it was something that was on my mind, but he could see it. He could literally see it in my countenance and the way that I was, I'm normally, chipper, always joking and really, enjoying service and all of that. But that day I was more somber than usual. But he recognized that because he knew me. And I think, what you guys said is so key. We have to develop relationships. One of the things that's so important in the church that I think is missed is community. And, I was doing some research when we were actually planning our launch here, and Barna Research did a study, and they polled 2,500 different churches, and those that were visitors first and became members. And one of the things they asked them is that what drove you to join this church? The number one thing that they answered was they felt like they belonged.
Wow,
it was
that's
community.
good.
Many times, especially as preachers, we think it's the word,
Right.
but
And it is.
yeah, but people are actually shocked when I share with them that out of all of those things, the word came in fourth place. The word came in fourth place. So number one was community. Number two was youth ministry.
Music.
And
Yep.
then
I was gonna say children. I was gonna say children's ministry.
Then number three was music. And then number four, of course, was the word. And so it was so eye-opening to see that many pastors now they've been forced to have to change, right?
Right.
There was years and years where I used to always get, as a media director and all this, I used to always try to get churches to do online services and all this. And I had several pastors that be like, oh, we don't want to use Facebook. That's the devil. YouTube, that's all the devil and all of this. And I told them, I said, when the pandemic hit, I said, isn't it interesting that you now have to use what you call was the devil? You got to use it to even have service now. Right. Yeah. And so, what I say that to say this, we have to get to a place where we don't demonize what we don't understand. Right.
That's it.
Because many times we'll demonize those with mental illness. We'll demonize those that may have problems without understanding what their situation is. And so we have to make sure that we're fostering an environment where they're willing to share. When you forge accountability with those around you, people are going to be accountable to you, right? And I'm going to be more apt to be accountable to somebody that's built a relationship with me than somebody that has not. And everything. And so I think that was a powerful thing that you mentioned, Natalie, as far as don't even set up the program yet, right?
Don't do it.
Learn about the people, right? Build those relationships. So that way, now you have the buy-in from them, and so when you do the program, they're more apt to come and participate in it. I remember one of our churches, they had, I think it was called Grief Share, I believe is what it's called, which is a program, and I think it's a national program, but you can set up local chapters or what have you in your churches and stuff, and that was a great program. That they had at the church, and people really bought into that. Why? Because they had already had fellowship, and I think that was real key or what have you. Well, our time has come to an end. This has been an amazing discussion. And listen, I don't want it to stop here. And so we're recording live, so I want to ask both of you: will you come back to the Kingdom Conversations podcast?
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Oh, absolutely. And
if you have more people on it, man, make sure Natalie is on there too. Me being back on is contingent upon her being on it too.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Absolutely.
I need Dr. Wright to bounce stuff off of.
Yeah, y'all make a great team, man. Y'all make my job easy.
Gotcha.
Definitely.
And you're going to be pastor of Great Emmanuel. Where is that in Durham? Because I'm in Emmanuel Temple on South Austin Avenue.
Yes. You're probably not that far from us.
I don't
We're
think
on
so.
East Main Street, right before you hit South Miami Boulevard.
Okay, now. Okay.
Yeah, near the it used to be, it probably still is, a DMV office, kind of close to there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're on that end of East Main Street.
Well, we agree, Pastor Jay.
Definitely. And so we're gonna close out now. But before we leave, I want both of my guests to kind of talk about some of the things they have going on. I know Dr. Wright has a great book that I've been reading. And speaking of that, let me get this one more thing in it. I'm gonna let y'all go. I thought it was something that was very interesting in your book when you said how you had dealt with a lot of patients that had dealt with depression and mental illness and all that. And the most difficult ones that you had to deal with turned out to be Christians.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was interesting, and kind of explain that or expound on that for me.
Yes, the very briefly, the reason I could definitively say that is that they were, for lack of a better way of putting it, inconsistent with treatment. Because they struggled with their faith, because they some of them weren't even sure that they were doing the right thing by seeking help. And some of the things I mentioned briefly in the book, and I alluded to this earlier. Some people would they would come back and say, "Well, I got the prescription filled, but it ended up changing my mind. I didn't take the medicine." Some people had poor attendance at their sessions. And, so again, there was a lot of inconsistency among Christian patients, again, because they were struggling with things, dealing with a lot of stigma. So yeah, that's the main reason I considered that particular group of patients very difficult to treat, as opposed to other people that were coming willingly, realized that they, needed the help, and also wanted the help and wanted to do all that they could, to get better.
Wow. Okay. And so now I think that's very interesting because I was like, and that really stuck out to me. I mean, as I was reading the book, I was like, wow. Out of everybody, it was the Christians. You know what I mean? I'm like, wow. And it was just amazing to me that there was even enough where you could recognize that, and I think that even speaks to the stigma that we're dealing with within the four walls of the church and dealing with mental illness or what have you. And so we're gearing to wrap up now, but before we do, I want to get some last thoughts from both of my guests and tell us about what you have going on. Of course, you want to talk about anything as far as your books or anything you have coming out. And let's start with Natalie. And let me know your last thoughts, anything you want to finish out saying, and then what you have going on.
My last thoughts are to just seek help when you know you need help. There are people out there that are ready for you and willing to take you in to help you with any situation so that you don't have to do this on your own. So there's help out there, and please seek help. If you don't know how, please you can contact me, or you can contact your provider, and they should have a referral list for a mental health provider that they refer to. So if you need some assistance, please let us know. I also wrote a book, and I didn't give you any, I'm going to hold it up. It's called Divorce Looks Good on You, A Girlfriend's Guide to Moving Towards Greatness After Divorce. And when I was going through my divorce, I was looking for something to help me stay positive and help me to thrive in this state. The stigma of divorce in the church is there. And I felt all of it being in a leadership role at my church. And I needed something to help me get through that period of time that was not going to make me depressed, but going to empower me to move and thrive after divorce. I couldn't find it, so I wrote it.
Wow.
So my mission now is to help women thrive after divorce and breakup. So I am planning, and I'm launching this today, Pastor Jay. So it's so important that you offer this position for me today, because
look at God.
I know, right? Look at God.
Hey,
I mean, your audience is going to see it before my audience. So, but I am having a girlfriend's day retreat here in Morrisville, where I live, and I'm going to help women walk away with a blueprint, a physical blueprint of how to date differently. We're going to start from the foundation. How did you learn how to be in relationship? Why are you ignoring the red flags that you know are there? Why are you continue to participate in negative patterns in relationship? And the program is called Same Guy, Different Name. So when you finish, you're going to have a tangible guide to help you date differently. And it's more of looking within and seeing how you are showing up in relationships. And so that when you are looking for someone else, you're not looking for them to complete you, because you are a whole person. You're looking for another whole person.
Right.
So that is my program. It is May 22nd. They can go to my website, thrivingafterdivorceandbreakup.com, for more information.
Awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, that's gonna be good. Yeah.
Man, goodness.
You should have a lot of women signing up for that. Definitely. All right, Dr. Wright.
Lord of mercy. Well, I'll be quick. The title of my book is called The Suppression of Depression. The subtitle, Addressing the Stigma of Depression Among Christians. Interestingly, the book launched in 2019, in the summer of 2019. So roughly about 6 months or so before the pandemic hit. We've discussed some of the content in the book already. It is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble online. Again, The Suppression of Depression. You probably can see in the background how the book cover looks. I'll just say very quickly, it is a very short read. Well, some people say it's not that many pages, but it's very dense in a good way, meaning some people say there's a lot of information on each page, but it's only 56 pages. And the last thing I'll say, I'm currently working with a company now who will be producing an audiobook version of my book. I hope to have that completed before the end of this year, probably by the fall. So be on the lookout for that as well. And thank you again, Natalie, for joining me.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining me.
And Pastor Jay, thanks for having me. God
Absolutely, man. Thank both of you guys for joining me tonight, and we're gonna do this again. I saw somebody said something about Mental Health Tuesdays or something like that. They said. I was like, okay, and now she got one for Natalie, Relationship Thursdays. Yeah, so they already naming our days.
I see. Yeah.
With the podcast or what have you. And so we thank again Sister Natalie. I sound like I'm in church. Natalie Fuel and Dr. Marion Wright for joining us tonight. And listen, we are excited about what Kingdom Conversations is going to do for not just our local community, just for churches here locally, but for the world. You saw tonight the mass volume of information we were able to receive from these experts, right? These are career experts that have been working in this field and have been able to help us. And we hope that you've gotten something out of this. Make sure that you like and share this. If you are watching live, you type in hashtag live. If you're watching the replay, hashtag replay. And share. Make sure you join our communities, the Kingdom Conversations communities on YouTube, Facebook, and on Instagram as well. Also going to be releasing the Anchor podcast. So you don't have to worry about looking at the video. You'll have the actual podcast audio that you can actually listen to as well. Listen, this is Pastor Jay signing off now. Remember to be the light that shines in darkness. We'll talk with you later.
Skin.